Well, good morning and welcome to Tuesdays with the Pilgrim as we continue reading Harold Bell Wright's book, The Shepherd of the Hills. Chapter 33, A Ride in the Night. Sammy arrived at the Ford homestead in time for dinner and was joyfully received by her friend Mandy. But early in the afternoon their pleasure was marred by a messenger from Long Creek on the other side of the river. Mrs. Ford's sister was very ill, and Mrs. Ford and Mandy must go at once. "But Sammy can't stay here alone," protested the good woman. "Mandy, you'll just have to stay." "Indeed she shall not," declared their guest. "I can ride up Jay Creek to the Forks and stay all night at Uncle Ike's. Brownie will make it easily in time for supper. You just get your things on and start right away."
"You'd better hurry, too," put in Mr. Ford. "There's a storm a-comin' afore long, and we gotta get across the river afore it strikes. I'll be here with the horses by the time you get your bonnets on." He hurried away to the barn for his team, while the women, with Sammy's assistance, made their simple preparations. As Mother Ford climbed into the big wagon, she said to Sammy, "It's an awful lonely old trip for you, child, and you must start right away so's to be sure to get there before it's plumb dark." While Mr. Ford added, as he started the team, "Your ponies are ready saddled, and if you hurry along, you'll just about make it. Don't get catched on Jakey in a big rain, whatever you do."
"Don't you worry about me," returned the girl. "Brownie and I could find the way in the dark."
But when her friends were gone, Sammy, womanlike, busied herself with setting the disordered house aright before she started on her journey. Watching the clouds, she told herself that there was plenty of time for her to reach the post office before the storm. It might not come that way at all, in fact. But the way up Jay Creek was wild and rough, and along the faint trail that twisted and wound like a slim serpent through the lonely wilderness, Brownie could make but slow time. As they followed the little path, the walls of the narrow valley grew steeper, more rocky and barren, and the road became more and more rough and difficult, until at last the valley narrowed to a mere rocky gorge, through which the creek ran, tumbling and foaming on its way. It was quite late when Sammy reached the point near the head of the stream, where the trail leads out of the canyon to the road on the ridge above. It was still a good 2 miles to the Forks. As she passed the spring, a few big drops of rain came pattering down, and looking up, she saw, swaying and tossing in the wind, the trees that fringed the ledges above, and she heard the roar of the oncoming storm. A short way up the side of the mountain, at the foot of the great overhanging cliff, there was a narrow bench, and less than 100 feet from where the trail finds its way through a break in the rocky wall, there was a deep cave-like hollow. Sammy knew the spot well. It would afford excellent shelter. Pushing Brownie up the steep path, she had reached this bench, when the rushing storm cloud shut out the last of the light, and the hills shook with a deafening crash of thunder. Instinctively, the girl turned her pony's head from the trail, and following the cliff reached the sheltered nook, just as the storm burst forth in all its fury. The rain came down in torrents, the forest roared, and against the black sky in an almost continuous glare of lightning, the big trees tugged and strained in their wild wrestle with the wind, while peal after peal of thunder, rolling, crashing, reverberating through the hills, added to the uproar. It was over in a little while. The wind passed, the thunder rumbled and growled in the distance, and the rain fell gently. But the sky was still lighted by the red glare. Though it was so dark that Sammy could see the trees and rocks only by the lightning's flash, she was not frightened. She knew that Brownie would find the way easily, and as for the wetting, she would soon be laughing at that with her friends at the post office. But as the girl was on the point of moving, a voice said, "It's a mighty good thing for us that this old ledge happened to be here, ain't it?" It was a man's voice, and another replied, "Right you are, and it's a good thing, too, that this blow came early in the evening." The speakers were between Sammy and the trail. They had evidently sought shelter from the storm a few seconds after the girl had gained her position. In the wild uproar she had not heard them, and as they crouched under the cliff, they were hidden by a projection of the rock. Though now and then, when the lightning flashed, she could see part of one of the horses. They might be neighbors and friends. They might be strangers, outlaws even. The young woman was too wise to move until she was sure. The first voice spoke again.
"Jack got off in a good time, did he?"
"Got a good start," replied the other. "He ought to be back with the posse by 10 at latest. I told him we would meet them at 9, where this trail comes into the big road."
"And how far do you say it is to Jim Lane's place, by the road and the old trail?"
asked the first voice. At the man's words, a terrible fear gripped Sammy's heart. Posse? That could mean only one thing: officers of the law. But her father's name and her home? In an instant, Jim's strange companionship with Wash Gibbs, their long mysterious rides together, her father's agitation that morning when he said goodbye, with 1,000 other things rushed through her mind. What terrible thing was this that she had happened upon in the night? What horrible trap had they set for her daddy? Her daddy Jim. For a trap it was. It could be nothing else. At any risk, she must hear more. She had already lost the other man's reply. Calming herself, the girl listened eagerly for the next word. A match cracked, the light flared out, and a whiff of tobacco smoke came curling around the rock. As one of the men said,
"Are you sure there's no mistake about their meeting at Lane's tonight?"
"Can't possibly be," came the answer. "I was lying in the bush right by the gate when the messenger got there, and I heard Jim give the order myself. Take it all the way through unless we make a slip tonight. It will be one of the prettiest cases I ever saw."
"Yes," said the other, "but you mustn't forget that it all hinges on whether or not the bank watchman is right in thinking he recognized Wash Gibbs."
"The man couldn't be mistaken there," returned the other. "There's not another man in the country the size of Gibbs, except the 2 Matthews, and of course they're out of the question. Then, look, Jim Lane was ready to move out because of the drought. Then all at once, after being away several days, the very time of the robbery, he changes his mind, and stays with plenty of money to carry him through. And now, here we are tonight, with that same old Bald-Knobber gang, what's left of 'em, called together in the same old way by Jim himself, to meet in his cabin. Take my word for it, we'll bag the whole outfit with the rest of the swag before morning. It's as sure as fate. I'm glad that girl's away from home, though." Sammy had heard enough. As the full meaning of the officer's words came to her, she felt herself swaying dizzily in the saddle and clung blindly to the pony's mane for support. Then something in her brain kept beating the words, "Ride, ride, ride!" Never for an instant did Sammy doubt her father. It was all some horrible mistake. Her daddy Jim would explain it all. Of course he would, if she could only get home first. But the men were between her and the path that led to the road. Then all at once she remembered that young Matt had told her how Jake Creek Hollow headed in the pinery below the ridge along which they went from Fall Creek to the Forks. It might be that this bench at the foot of the ledge would lead the way out. As quick as thought, the girl slipped to the ground, and taking Brownie by the head, began feeling her way along the narrow shelf. Dead leaves, tangled grass, and ferns, all wet and sodden, made a soft carpet, so the men behind the rock heard no sound. Now and then the lightning revealed a glimpse of the way for a short distance, but mostly she trusted blindly to her pony's instinct. Several times she stumbled over jagged fragments of rock that had fallen from above, cutting her hand and bruising her limbs cruelly. Once she was saved from falling over the cliff by the little horse's refusal to move. A moment she stood still in the darkness. Then the lightning showed the way past the dangerous point. After a time that seemed hours, she noticed that the ledge had become no higher than her head, and that a little further on the bench was lost in the general slope of the hill. She had reached the head of the hollow. A short climb up the side of the mountain, and pushing through the wet bushes, she found herself in the road. She had saved about 3 miles, and it was still nearly 5 miles to her home. An instant later the girl was in her saddle, and the brown pony was running his best. Sammy always looked back upon that ride in the darkness, and indeed upon all that happened that night, as to a dream of horror. As she rode, that other night came back to her, the night she had ridden to save the shepherd, and she lived over and over again that evening in the beautiful woods with young Matt. Oh, if he were only here with her now! Unconsciously at times she called his name aloud again and again, keeping time to the beat of her pony's feet. At other times she urged Brownie on, and the little horse, feeling the spirit of his mistress, answered with the best he had to give. With eager outstretched head and wide nostrils he ran as though he understood the need. How dark it was! At every bound they seemed plunging into a black wall. What if there should be a tree blown across the road? At the thought she grew faint. She saw herself lying senseless, and her father carried away to prison. Then, rallying, she held her seat carefully. She must make it as easy as possible for Brownie, dear little Brownie. How she strained her eyes to see into the black night. How she prayed God would keep the little horse. Only once in a lifetime, it seemed to her, did the pony's iron shoe strike sparks of fire from the rocks, or the lightning give her a quick glimpse of the road ahead. They must go faster, faster, faster! Those men should not have her Daddy Jim, not unless Brownie stumbled. Where the road leaves the ridge for Fall Creek Valley, Sammy never tightened the slack of rein, and the pony never shortened his stride by so much as an inch. It was well that he was hill-bred, for none but a mountain horse could have kept his feet at such a terrific pace down a rocky slope. Down the valley road, past the mill and over the creek they flew, then up the first rise of the ridge beyond. The pony was breathing hard now, and the girl encouraged him with loving words and endearing terms, pleading with him to go on, go on, go on. At last they reached the top of the ridge. The way was easier now. Here and there, where the clouds were breaking, the stars looked through. But over the distant hills the lightning still played, showing which way the storm had gone. And against the sky, now showing but dimly under ragged clouds and peeping stars, now outlined clearly against the flashing light, she saw the round, treeless form of old Dewey above her home. And that's the end of Chapter 33. We'll continue next week with Chapter 34, Jim Lane Keeps His Promise. Until then, take care, stay safe, and God bless. Also, if you haven't entered the giveaway yet, this is your last chance. We'll close it at the end of this week, but you'll need to go back 2 episodes ago, and in that video I'll give you instructions on how to enter. Until then, God bless.